The old heads are starting to come through for the Bravos.
This is Locked On Sports Atlanta, and it's time for the Atlanta Baseball Party, only on Locked On Podcast Network. Your team every day.
Welcome into the Atlanta Baseball Party, your home for the best Atlanta Braves baseball talk. It's local insight you can't get anywhere but right here at Locked On. I'm your host, Tenitra Batiste. Alongside me are Jarvis Davis and Grant McAuley. This episode is brought to you by PrizePicks, the easiest and most exciting way to play daily fantasy sports. Go to prizepicks.com/LockedOnMLB and use code all lowercase LockedOnMLB for a first deposit match up to $100. The Atlanta Baseball Party is also part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. So MH2 is on the mend. We'll talk about his return and we'll download with Grant McAuley a little later. But first, let's get into the Braves 4-3 win over the Giants and how the second extras win in a row has us feeling. So Jarvis, for the second straight game, the Braves beat the Giants in the 10th inning, this time with a Travis d'Arnaud RBI single that followed up an early solo shot to give the Braves the 4-3 win. But do the back-to-back wins make you forget about that series loss to the lowly Colorado Rockies?
It won't make me completely forget about it, but when you think about what Travis d'Arnaud is doing, this dude has been absolutely clutch. This dude has been coming through, and I know a lot of times people have kind of questioned why Sean Murphy hasn't been playing more and why is he splitting time with Travis d'Arnaud. This is why. Because since July 3rd, the man has been batting .309, 6 home runs, 15 RBIs, and a OPS of 940. So the dude is almost guaranteed to be get on base and be able to be productive for you. So I think overall, when you think about being 35 years old and everybody's just looking around, just try to see who's going to do something to try to get this team a win because they've been struggling so much at the plate, and we've seen it in back-to-back nights that, hey, this dude has come through in the 10th inning, ironically, to be able to get the Braves a win. And not only just in these last two games, but from these last month and a half or so, this dude is just absolutely being clutch for the Braves, and I'm all here for it, T.
Yeah, and I can appreciate, what Travis d'Arnaud has been able to do the last couple nights. Also, it was like we kind of went back in time a little bit. I'm not going to say completely, but it was like we went back in time just a hair in terms of what we were able to get overall, I'll say, from the pitching staff, because, everybody was kind of wondering what that was going to look like last night, because we know what we've seen of late. Charlie Morton just keeping it real. So I think when you kind of say that, talking about the old heads and looking at the fact that he, first of all, went 6 innings, that's a start. That's a good thing, right? Then only giving up 2 runs and striking out 8. That's amazing. That's amazing, considering what Charlie Morton has done overall. And then, of course, the bullpen giving up 1 definitely is something that we can appreciate, although that's, in essence, what sent the game to extra.
Flashbacks to Sunday.
Exactly. So it was like, you were triggered for a minute, and then it all came together. But I think also, and kind of not like an old head, but we'll kind of call him an in the middle type old head, but also good to see what Austin Riley was able to do. And just, I think when I look at it overall, I'm excited to some degree, just because the guys who kind of kept the Braves in it for a minute early are now starting to, be those guys, particularly Travis d'Arnaud. And I think you make a great point about that. We just haven't seen what the Braves haven't seen what they needed to see out of Sean Murphy since he's been back. So yeah, you have to split that time because you need offensive firepower from wherever you can get it. And d'Arnaud is one of those guys. And I think ultimately, when I look at it, now I'm going to tell you the truth. I don't necessarily have, I think, what it's called forgetting, but I'll call it like unremembering. I heard this term years ago, and it was basically saying, unremembering is almost like, it's still kind of back there, but because you haven't completely forgot it, we're not tossing it into the sea of forgetfulness, but you have not it's not staying at the top of your mind. So I'm going to call it unremembering, because I can't unremember the 6-5 loss and the 9-8 loss, and the fact that the Braves had to score 11 runs just to make sure they didn't get swept by the Rockies.
Right.
But then right before that, they got swept by the Brewers, and they could only get a split of the series against the Marlins. They won the first two, then lost the last one, and then we saw a 6-game skid. So it's always that same thing, Jarvis, where the sample size is just too small for me to say I've just completely forgotten.
Yeah, for sure. And I'm with you. And kind of Charlie Morton's the way what he's been doing this year is kind of the identity of the Braves, right? Because he's been up and
Up and
down
yeah.
all season, and he even talked about that. He was very reflective in a recent interview on the AJC, just talking about you know what he's missing out on when it comes to his family and everything. Like what am I really playing for? Am I really just playing for myself or because he's pitched in the big games, he's won two
Yeah.
World Series as a player. So when you think about all of his accomplishments, and also he got his 2000 strikeout, like only 89 people have ever done that in Major League Baseball history. So he's in a very, very exclusive group right there. So when you think about him coming through and he's against the National League wild card competitor as well. So these type of games right here are playoff like games. It's going to be a playoff like atmosphere too
Yeah.
when the Braves come home against the Phillies. So with them catching this type of run and Travis d'Arnaud coming through like he's been coming through for these past couple of games and for the last month and a half, yeah, I feel like me, T. I'm gonna be the eternal optimist on this show. Like this guy, these two, when guys like this are coming through for you, and then like you mentioned, Austin Riley, he just been on a heater and kind of like a quiet one too. He's like, all right,
Yeah.
Austin Riley's still doing his thing. He's like, okay, that's cool, but nobody even want to talk about it. But so when
Right.
you get all of these factors coming together, I feel like this kind of helps you understand why this roster was made up the way it be and why those guys are still here playing with the Braves and still being big time contributors.
Yeah, still a little too up and down for me, because just like with Uncle Charlie, I look at this team. I told you what I saw in that 6-game skid. Same thing for him. 3 games in the month of August. Yes, 2 wins and a loss. But then I go back to July and it's 3 losses and a win. So
Mhm.
again, when I see a little bit more, when I get a bigger sample size, maybe when we're talking about a 6-game winning streak versus talking about a 6-game skid that was just a couple games back, then maybe I'll be just a little bit more optimistic. But I'm just going to reserve that for a little bit later down the road, maybe when we get in the middle of that home stretch and see how they're going to do against the Phillies. Now, Brian Snitker had some interesting comments post game. He said it's kind of go time with all of that. There's no more extra days and all of that unless we work it in with off days. Now, granted, Snit was actually talking about go time for his all-star pitching trio of Chris Sale, Reynaldo Lopez, and Max Fried. But is this still the mindset that the Braves overall need to solidify for a spot in the postseason?
Absolutely. I think the main thing is I feel like it's the mindset. That's the most important part for me because it's some would say, and I'm included in that group, hey, it's been go time.
Yeah, oh, yeah,
Because there's no guarantee that you're going to get into the playoffs because you're in that that bottom part of that wild card race, and the Mets are right on your heels, and the
and
team
the
that you
Giants
just beat
too.
Giants as well. So when you have all these different factors coming into play that could potentially unseat you and you be sitting at home looking crazy. Now, granted, you may be able to give the benefit of the doubt with all the injuries that you had to deal with, but man, this roster is loaded, and the guys that you have out there, they should be able to get you into the playoffs. So yeah, I just like it from a mindset standpoint. Okay, it's go time. It's time for us to get going. There are no more extra rest days and all that stuff. Yeah, man, all that stuff is done. Hey, it's time to go. And to be able to see a guy like Chris Sale saying, hey, I'll take the ball, I'll stop this losing streak. Those are the type of things that you want to be able to have going forward to close out this season. So at the end of September, when we're looking up at the standings, we're like, all right, getting ready for the playoffs. And I don't care at this point, I don't care whether or not they have a bye. I don't care about that. I just want them to be able to get in the door. And once you get in the door, we know anything can happen.
Indeed, because the team that's 2 teams ahead of them, the Arizona Diamondbacks, we know what they did last season in their run to the World Series. And then, of course, you've got the Padres right in front of them. And the Padres are one of those teams that nobody ever really trusts. So, yeah, I think this is one of those moments where you say to yourself, there's go time in that you can still jump over them. And there's an example from just last season, and of course, a couple seasons back with the Nationals, where teams will make that run coming out of that wild card spot. But yeah, they've got some work to do, and hopefully they'll be able to get it done to close out this particular series, because you have Holmes on the mound today, Grant Holmes, that is. And then once, Grant Holmes, Max Fried will be back, projected to be back on Thursday to wrap up this series with the Giants before the Braves wrap up their West Coast swing against the Angels. When we come back, we'll download with Grant McAuley and Going Deep. This episode of our Atlanta Baseball Party is brought to you by Liquid IV and also brought to you by Prize Picks. And when you're taking in America's pastime, don't forget to hydrate with Liquid IV's Popsicle Firecracker flavor, a surefire summer hit. Get hydrated with electrolytes, essential vitamins, and clinically tested nutrients from the #1 powered hydration brand in America, because baseball and summer go together like Liquid IV and indulgent hydration. Now, think about this. It is blazing in Atlanta, and friends and I were out a couple of days ago, and we were just talking about how hot it was. And lo and behold, a friend of mine pops out the Liquid IV, and it kind of resets her. So definitely, I can tell you from seeing it work, it does refresh you and it gets you re-energized. And listen to this. That's kind of a cool flavor, Popsicle Firecracker. It's a festive blend of citrus-fueled lemon, lime, tart cherry, and raspberry flavors. And that's actually the flavor she happened to have. So you can find all your favorite flavors on their website, including lemon lime, all the way to pina colada. Now, powered by LIV Hydroscience, it's an optimized ratio of electrolytes, essential vitamins, and clinically tested nutrients that turn ordinary water into extraordinary hydration. 3 times the electrolytes of the leading sports drink, 8 essential vitamins and nutrients, and always non-GMO, vegan, gluten-free, dairy-free, and soy-free. So no more thirsty summers when you indulge in hydration with Liquid IV. Get 20% off your first order when you go to liquidiv.com and use code MLB at checkout. That's 20% off your first order using promo code MLB at liquidiv.com. This episode of our Atlanta Baseball Party is also brought to you by Prize Picks. Now, Prize Picks is America's #1 daily fantasy sports app with over 5 million active members. It's also the easiest and most exciting way to play daily fantasy sports. Unlike other apps, it's just you against the numbers. All you do is pick more or less on 2 to 6 player stat projections and watch the winnings roll in. Get in on the daily action with your friends and become a part of the Prize Picks community today. Why? Because you can now win up to 100 times your money on Prize Picks with as little as 4 correct picks. You can turn $10 into 1,000. Now, think about this. Players and stat types that you're selecting. You heard Jarvis talking about Travis d'Arnaud a little bit earlier. Think about it. You might want to do a little something and see if maybe you can pair that with the Atlanta Dream. They're coming back this week, and Ryan Howard is supposed to be back on the team. That might be a pairing that could work for you. Now, download the Prize Picks app today. Use code Locked On MLB for a first deposit match up to $100. That's code Locked On MLB on Prize Picks for a deposit match up to $100. Pick more, pick less. It's that easy.
I want to start by saying thank you for making the Atlanta Baseball Party your first listen today. For your second listen, make sure you check out Locked On MLB, where his host, Paul Sullivan, a.k.a. Sully, is here to provide you daily national expertise with his trademark humor to help you get ready for the playoffs. You can prepare for the Fall Classic with Sully, who has it all covered every single day right here on Locked On MLB, available on YouTube, wherever you download your podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network. Your team every day. Now, Grant McAuley, joins us on the regular here on the Atlanta Baseball Party. Now, Grant, I gotta start off with that last game in that Rocky series. Like, one of the things that really concerns me the most is the way that defense was being played, and then the bullpen was another thing that just really just stood out to me. That, and we're not used to really seeing that. So, what was kind of going through your mind when you saw how the Braves just gave it away late in that game?
Well, a few things have been going on leading into that game that I think over about a week and a half, losing 7 out of 8 after dropping that one. I mean, a game that they should have won. And obviously they would agree with that. They talked about that afterwards. It was a demoralizing defeat. And it's hard to use the word demoralizing about games, I feel like, in August or, earlier in the season, really. I mean, once you get late, and I guess it is getting later, but, September, October, yeah, I feel like those losses can feel a lot bigger. This was just one of those that felt like you had it right there in your hands and it slipped through your fingers. But I think it goes back to being kind of a cumulative effect of Braves starting pitchers had really not done their job very well for about a week. Now, Spencer Schwellenbach did a great job in that finale against the Rockies. Don't get it wrong. But
Sure.
leading up to that, there had been a lot of trouble getting past the fifth inning for Brave starters. And what that does is it puts more tax on the bullpen, which then will change the way that the bullpen is going to be deployed and managed, especially when you have a 6-run lead and you're thinking, okay, we can stay away from the high leverage guys now and just kind of find our way to what we hope will be a nice, tidy win to close out the series. And it just didn't work that way. Luke Jackson got in trouble. By the time they got Joe Jimenez in the game, I mean, the Rockies, give them their credit. They were aggressive. They were swinging the bats. They got the job done. It wasn't a whole bunch of wild pitches and walks and, balks and everything else that was going wrong. It was just a solid hit parade by the Rockies in that game. But, we haven't seen a lot of that. But I feel like as much as anything, it's because the Braves pitching staff has been such a strength this year, and the rotation, despite having so many moving parts, has also been a strength. It's kept the bullpen from having to be overly taxed. But as the season has worn on, and we got into July and now into August, I think we're finally starting to see the effect of what if the rotation is not able to cover those innings? What kind of tax is that going to put on the bullpen? And games like that can be part of that tax.
Speaking of taxes, how about this? AJ Minter, we found out that he's having hip issues again. He was on the IL about a month and a couple of days
Yeah.
early on in the season, and now he's going back for that same reason. Now, given kind of AJ Minter and what he's going into his free agent year, do you feel like this may have been his last time we see AJ Minter in the Braves uniform?
I mean, maybe. I mean, that's one of the many stories that I guess you can attach to it. But in the short term, I mean, is this, could there be a worse time for the Braves to lose one of their more dependable and useful bullpen pieces over the years? And I have different people saying different kind of things on social, and everybody's got different ways they feel about it, different opinions and different vantage points and all of that kind of stuff. And a lot of folks will look at it, oh well, I don't trust AJ Minter, and I look at his overall body of work, and I'm not saying it's perfect, and
Who's saying
certainly no
that?
reliever is perfect, but I mean,
Right.
this has been one of your better relievers every single year. And to lose him right now and for any length of time makes the bullpen weaker. So let's just get that all out of the way. Putting that aside, though, I just kind of look at it as, we don't know how that's all going to play out. And I don't know that that's necessarily something that's on, top of mind in the moment there. But certainly, I mean, you get into free agency, anything can happen. And we've seen guys go different places, and we've seen new guys come over that you never expected maybe to put on a Braves uniform, like a Chris Sale. You just don't know. I mean, obviously that was a trade. A lot of trades that the Braves have pulled off to bring in players. They're not necessarily big on the free agent pool, but it's going to be interesting to see that. But if it is, then I think people need to recognize just how good he's been for quite some time as a reliable member of the Braves bullpen. And there are a lot of years it mixed in there where you could argue that he has been their most valuable reliever. So this is one it's going to hurt if he's unable to get back and help the Braves out in any kind of meaningful way down the stretch and into October.
One thing that I've always try to kind of pay attention to is how your teammates talk about you. And when you hear a guy like Aaron Bummer talk about AJ Minter, it's like there's a certain level of reverence there.
Yeah.
And that's who I point to and listen to for all those people who want to be the detractors of AJ Minter, because like you got to look at the overall body of work, and the man has gave it all, and
He
he
gets the
was even
ball.
pitching. Yeah, man, he's just a bull. Or like our friend John Chucker used to say, he's a bulldog, right? And I mean that, and I'm not being facetious when I say that. So yeah, I think we have to respect that. But like, if it is his last hurrah with the Braves, like you gotta tip your cap
For
as he
sure.
walks out that door for sure.
Yeah.
I want to kind of go to this, that pitcher's duel that we on on Monday on Monday night. I think that was just something that was just a beautiful thing to watch. We talk about Blake Snell and Chris Sale just going at it. Blake Snell even said it himself. He was just like, man, It was just a matter of who's going to be able to stay in the longest. I was like, oh my
Mhm.
God, yes, I love that type of stuff, man. Type of guys that just go out there and compete. So, like for you, and I don't know, when I was watching the game, I kind of start thinking ahead as far as playoffs. Like, okay, like how can we get Chris Sale on the mound for 4 times, in a playoff
Yeah,
series? Because this
yeah,
is how you win a doggone series right here, having that type of stability on the mound and he just going at it, man. How
yeah.
beautiful that was to watch last night.
Yeah, and that'll set the tone certainly. And I think the crazy thing was, not even 24 hours after you have, well, maybe a little more than 24 hours, but the day after you have one of your worst losses of the season, you come back out and have a game like that where it's not about a big inning, it's not about a huge comeback. It's again, and I guess Blake Snell said it, who's going to, leave that game first, and how are the bullpens going to respond when it becomes that battle back and forth. It was great to see what Chris Sale did in this one. It was just a continuation of just how good he's been this year. I think he's the front runner for the National League in the Cy Young race. That won't necessarily win anything for the Braves outright, but would you believe that Chris Sale's never won a Cy Young award, even though I would consider him one of the best starting pitchers in the last decade and a half anyway? He has
Right.
been that good, and this could be his year. Then, as he did step aside, the Braves bullpen stepping up. Joe Jimenez getting right back on the beam after being part of that meltdown that you had in Colorado. Great to see that. Joe's been a way more of a net positive than a net negative this year. He's had some pretty rotten luck as well. It wasn't necessarily the case in Colorado, but a couple of his losses, I don't know that you can look at Joe Jimenez and be like, it's definitely his fault. But putting that aside, then you had Raisel Iglesias come on. He just put on a clinic in his couple of innings worth of work. So it was great, top to bottom for the Braves pitching staff and much needed. And hopefully you see the offense kind of get back and going. I know they were scoring a bunch of runs in Coors Field, and that's one thing. Can they score a bunch of runs outside of that? That's what we need to find out. But Jorge Soler started swinging the bat well. We've seen Austin Riley, Marcell Ozuna obviously have been on a roll for a while here, and maybe Matt Olson can step into this whole thing, and that would give the Braves a pretty formidable lineup. And they welcome Michael Harris back this week as well, and that is no small development for the Braves, who also, by the way, could have Reynaldo Lopez back in the mix before this road trip is over. We'll see how it all plays out. But Jarvis, to go from the lowest of lows in Colorado to winning a game like they did Monday, and now feeling like maybe finally some reinforcements are starting to come along the way, maybe this is where some things will kind of at least fall into place so that the Braves can have the opportunity to at least be as full a staff as they can be as they await Ozzy Albies and get on some kind of roll, because they need to do it now. The clock is ticking as the Braves have been pushed to the edge of the playoff picture in the National League.
Yeah, man. This is I said this West Coast road was very important when, especially going up against the San Francisco
Mhm.
Giants. They have to get three in this
Yep.
series for
Yep.
sure. Like that, they have to, because this is that can be something that can come back to bite you if you don't down the road, because we know that they are in these conversations for the wild card as
Mhm.
well. So, um, but I really appreciate what Chris Sale has been doing as far as being on the mound. Like you mentioned, like to come off that type of loss and then have that guy come to the mound where you know exactly what to expect, you know exactly
Yeah.
what you're going to get. And I'm just like, man, that is. I'm sure there's a lot of comfort that comes, in that locker room when they know he's going to be on the mound. So
Yeah.
for me, I think that there is something also that I've kind of been thinking about as well. Like Jorge Soler, we know he has been struggling in the outfield, but I said coming in, when people start raising those concerns when they traded for him, like, hey man, the man hasn't played in the outfield all year and all that stuff. He's been a DH and all that. But I was like, man, as long as that guy brings that bat,
Hmm.
I think we can figure it out. Like you said, with
Yeah.
Michael Harris coming back, I feel like we can figure out that outfield aspect of it, as long as he's tearing the cover off the ball. And it seems like he's been doing that lately.
He has. I mean, homered in all 3 games against the Rockies, worked some walks as well against Blake Snell in the first game. CB Buckner was behind the plate. So, the strike zone is only a suggestion. It's not
Yeah,
necessarily set in stone.
right.
Putting that aside, now, I mean, Jorge Soler with a big series against Colorado showed you again what he's capable of, because those home runs that he hits, the kind that he hits, they'll leave any park. It's not just a thin air in Colorado. But yeah,
Right.
you get him going at the top of the order. Sure, I understand he hadn't played a lot of outfield, but that's just one of the trade-offs. You want to get that offense, you kind of have to live with some of the things that aren't so great. And there have been some moments where, in baseball and most sports as well, the ball will find you. That play will be called. It will come up. The guy who's not necessarily the strongest at something is going to be called upon to do that thing. And for Jorge Soler, that's throwing a glove and just try to get himself going, and get the Braves going at the top of the order as well. That's what they're asking for him.
Yes, that's what I'm asking for you for stepping up and coming on and joining us and going deep with Grant McAuley. We appreciate you. He is the host of From the Diamond Podcast and also Locked on Braves postcast. And he also makes an appearance on Locked on Braves as well. So make sure you guys check my guy Grant out. Grant, we appreciate you. Coming up next, I'm telling you guys, it's the stretch.
This episode of the Atlanta Baseball Party is brought to you by Ibotta and eBay Motors. Sandals, sunscreen, snacks for the kids. What do these have in common? You're probably buying a ton again this summer or have bought a ton again this summer, but don't stress about the cost. You can use Ibotta and get cash back on all of your purchases when you stock up on all of your summer essentials. Are you taking that dream vacation this summer but dreading the cost? Well, Ibotta, you can get cash with that entity back on all of your purchases, rather, so you can spend more time making memories this summer with less time dreaming about them. So this is a free app that lets you earn cash back every time you shop, earning hundreds of items from groceries to beauty supplies, even toys for Ibotta. So make sure you're beating inflation no matter what you're purchasing. In fact, the average Ibotta user earns $256 per year, and that could cover the cost of an entire shopping trip, that flight you've been eyeing, or the fancy dinner you've been craving. So right now, Ibotta is offering our listeners $5 just for trying Ibotta by using the code LOCKEDONMLB when you register. Just go to the App Store or Google Play Store and download the free Ibotta app to start earning cash back and use code LOCKEDONMLB. Again, that's IBOTTA in the Google Play or App Store and use code LOCKEDONMLB and join the over 50 million users who use Ibotta to earn cash back every time they shop. Passion, drive, patience, they're all the formula for winning championships, and it's also what keeps your ride or die alive. eBay Motors has everything you need to maintain your vehicle and level it up to peak performance. Superchargers, roof racks, exhaust kits, LED headlights, and so much more. Whether you're into speed, power, or style, eBay Motors has you covered. With over 122 million parts for your number one ride or die, you'll always find exactly what you're looking for, including one of these little pipes that I had to order recently just to make sure that my engine on my Honda Pilot is actually moving pristinely through the streets of Atlanta. Now, eBay Motors, the big deal for them is that they want you burning rubber and not cash. With all the parts you need at prices you want, it's easy to make your car the MVP and bring home huge wins. Keep your ride or die alive at ebaymotors.com. Eligible items only, exclusions do apply, and eBay Guaranteed Fit is only available to U.S. customers. All right, JD, as you and Grant talked about earlier, Michael Harris II is eligible to be and likely will be activated from the 60-day IL today. How big would it be to get MH2 back in center field, back in the lineup?
It will be huge because here's the thing. Like, I've been really concerned about how Jorge Soler has been playing in the outfield. He's had his issues, right? And I kind of understand it. But, one of the things that I said that came with Jorge Soler, and I kind of talked about this with Grant too, is that I need you to bring that bat and we'll figure out the field part later, right? So, and here we are now with Michael Harris II coming back. This the later part, because here's the thing. Once Michael Harris comes back, he's going to be in center field, obviously. Then you put Kelnick, who has a lot of range because he's been playing center field in his absence, and that leaves less ground for Jorge Soler to have to cover. So when you think about it from that standpoint, it's like, okay, all right, now we can widen their coverage essentially of the outfield, and
Right.
all Jorge Soler has to do is maybe judge those balls that come his way like directly. So and when you think about it from that standpoint, I absolutely love it, because we got guys like James Laureano out here misjudging fly balls, like routine type fly balls. I'm like, dude, what are you doing? So all of those things have came to mind when I said that when we found out that he's set to come back. And when you think about him coming back and not having, he's one of those guys where you set it and forget it in the outfield. You set it and forget it, and then you get a guy like Jared Kelnick in that left field spot, and also it kind of put the Braves in a position to kind of say, hey, okay, who are we gonna clear this roster spot with? Do you go with a guy like Eli White, or do you go with a guy like Adam Duvall, who has been awful this year? So I think if we see, because what they did with Eddie Rosario, and he got DFA'd and everything like that, but it just makes you think, okay, is this really a hard decision for the Braves, or they're going to try to figure out a way to keep Adam Duvall on this roster? But yeah, overall, I feel like Michael Harris solidifies this outfield to be able to get ready for the geared up for the postseason.
Yeah, because when I look at Michael Harris II, I think, to your point, it's the defense that the Braves are surely missing. And don't get me wrong, his bat was warming up a little bit as he kind of entered that phase of, unfortunately, going on the IL. So he was kind of getting there, but because he wrapped up at that point, he had like a 250 average and OBP of like 295. So he was kind of on his way back. But ultimately speaking, it's the defense. If you can just get that out of him, I think that would be great. And also, to your earlier point about Jorge Soler, the Braves knew what they were getting with him. He's a player who, up to this point in the season, hadn't even played. He was literally not even playing in the outfield. So it was kind of like, okay, brace yourself for any time you have to possibly put him in a place where he's not really comfortable. But maybe now that you don't have to put him there, now you can get out of him what you wanted to get out of him, because ultimately you were looking at how he was performing before and saying to yourself, oh, wait a minute, there's something that we can get out of a bat of someone who's also familiar with the Braves system, familiar with the Braves philosophy, and therefore can maybe bring something back to the table sooner rather than later. Now, speaking of bringing something back to the table, Reynaldo Lopez made a rehab start with the Stripers Tuesday. He tossed 4 innings, gave up 3 runs on 6 hits to go with a walk and 4 strikeouts. Now, Lopez, of course, hasn't pitched since July 28th when he exited with elbow discomfort. But with that rehab start under his belt, this might finally mean we're getting the all-star trio of Lopez, Sale, and Fried back together in the rotation, and that has got to be encouraging for the Braves.
Absolutely, because when you think about it, they haven't been in the pitching rotation together since the All-Star break, because Max Fried had his issue right out in the game, after the game, and then of course Reynaldo Lopez had his not too long afterwards. So when you think about it from that standpoint, that is what is going to give them a chance, right? When you're talking about going into the playoffs, like I said, at the end of September, this is what what you have to be focused on, because that rotation is it's a 3-man rotation when the playoffs roll around. Because I would love to see Chris Sale run out there twice in the series, because I'm feeling like, hey, this dude is almost guaranteed to go 6-7 innings, maybe, and gonna strike out probably about 6 or 7 guys and give up maybe 1 or 2 runs at max. So all you got to do is give him 3 runs, and we're looking at a dub. So for those reasons, I feel like getting the band back together, getting acclimated, getting some starts up under their belt, and start to get into a nice groove. Reynaldo Lopez, speaking of, I feel like that'll help this team, give me a better picture of what their playoffs look like, because coming into the playoffs last year, leading to the playoffs last year, like, oh yeah, they're gonna score 1,000 million runs and they're gonna hit 34 home runs in one series and all that stuff. Yeah, no, it doesn't work like that in the playoffs. It's all about pitching, and that's what has carried this team throughout this entire year. So, and these 3 guys, they have to be healthy and pitching like they've been pitching for this entire year. And if they are, like, you got to give them a chance. You have to give them a chance if this trio is healthy.
Well, I would agree with you, because the numbers don't lie. The fact that they've won 2 games in a row against the Giants, who were right on their heels in that wild card race, look at the way those games were won. 4-3. Charlie Morton only giving up a couple of runs, Chris Sale giving up no runs. So you're absolutely right. Seeing them at their best, although Charlie Morton isn't necessarily in that 3-man rotation, still, that's encouraging to see, because it takes us back to, okay, this is where the pitching is more important, because again, when I was
Mhm.
talking about the fact that you had a team the last couple of that that 6-game losing skid, if you will. What are you talking about? You're talking about giving up 8 runs. You're talking about giving up 11 runs, and that's just not going to be the way that you're going to get to not just get to the postseason, but actually make a run in the postseason. Just got to
Sure.
be a little better. And I think too, when you look at it across time, it's been tough kind of plugging in guys like Grant Holmes or hoping Bryce Elder was going to return to form, and he kind of didn't. So it's
Mhm.
one of those things where when I see it, I definitely get encouraged because now you've given those guys rest. Lopez will obviously he was resting because he was on the IL, Freed, unfortunately for the same. But I'm talking about when Snit was plugging those guys
Yeah.
in hopes of giving his 3-man rotation some rest because he was saying the same thing you're saying, which is in September and October we're going to need these guys. So I may just take some L's in July and early August, but he's seeing the bigger picture of it.
Yeah, I think he even went as far as to say that it was frustrating trying to figure out who to plug in
Yeah.
on any given day because of they had so many injuries. So yeah, I feel like Snit is like ready to, from a mindset standpoint, like we talked about earlier. I feel like he's ready to just pencil in guys and just go and not have to worry about, oh my God, this dude is injured, so I got to figure out who to put this in, who do we send up, who do we send down, and all that stuff. Yeah, so like our colleague Randy Mack used to say, firing up that doggone bus. Like I'm sure they're tired of firing up that bus and they want to kind of get settled in from a roster standpoint so they can go out and just worry about going to go play.
Indeed. Thanks to our everydayers for making the Atlanta Baseball Party your first listen of the day. Be sure to stop by Locked On Braves for your second listen, and be sure to like and subscribe to our YouTube channel. We're free and available wherever you download your podcasts. We'll see you on the Atlanta Sports Party Thursday.